First of all, I want to say that you really couldn't get the flavor in the few minutes that both Pete and Mark talked about their true stature. I mean, California in general, and Santa Cruz in particular, is really fortunate to have some world-renowned scientists working in this area, and these two are certainly among the best in the world. And so the science that went into the development of marine protected areas is quite strong. And we don't have the time to really get into the depth of that, but I hope you take that as a given to start with. And I'm going to talk about the deeper water areas. Mark alluded to his chicken divers, and I used to think that it was because they were cowardly. Then I realized it was because the divers taste like chicken to the white sharks. And I work in deeper water areas with surface vessels and submersibles and remotely operated vehicles. So we don't have to say we're taste like chicken. We're just cowardly. So is this? There it goes. It's a little bit of a lag here. So we've talked about the purpose of the MPA. So I'm going to talk about two projects that we've had to do baseline surveys. One is the California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program, where we worked with charter boat skippers and volunteer anglers to fish inside and outside MPAs. Another one is some submersible surveys that we do. And in collaboration with Dean Wendt of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, we've developed a California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program to span the Central Coast, and we're working on expanding these techniques across the entire state. And our goals, and I'll rip through these quickly, are just to engage stakeholders in monitoring MPAs in a rigorous way. And there are a number of different reasons why we believe that this collaborative fisheries approach is really important. Some of which are to involve the users in the monitoring, but also to access the deeper areas that you can't access by scuba or too shallow for submersibles. And we've conducted rod and reel surveys for the last 4 years, and some trapping surveys in these areas off of Año Nuevo, off of Point Lobos, Piedras Blancas, Cambria, and Point Bouchon. And we have areas that are inside and outside, and our sampling design is to identify similar habitats outside as inside, and that's the same as Pete and Mark have done, where we try to identify habitats that are as similar as possible so you can get good comparisons inside and outside. Then we conduct typical charter fishing activities with a scientific crew where we gather the fish that are caught, and we will, if the next slide comes up, measure them, identify the species. We put an external dart tag in them that looks like this and has our name and phone number on it. So if it's caught, we can identify where it moved to. And we release the fish, and we use fish descending devices, and we degas the swim bladders so that, as you know, many of the species here, rockfish species, have swim bladders and just float if you just toss them back. Well, we help them get back to the bottom so that they survive. So in the past 4 years, we've captured, identified, measured, tagged, and released nearly 30,000 fishes in the MPAs that I showed you, utilizing a large number of volunteer hours and commercial fishing vessels along the Central Coast. And we've identified 41 fish species. One of the things that is characteristics of MPAs is they have two general benefits. One might be for conservation benefits, diversity of species benefits. One is for fishery benefits. And so we're trying to adapt our fishing techniques to capture as many different species as possible so we can get an idea of what's there. And so we have species composition for all of these areas so we can identify what the both common and rare species are. We get size frequency distributions such as Mark described. And I'll just flash through. One of the interesting things is there are about 60 different species of rockfish alone, and hundreds of species in the nearshore environment. So the challenge is, in terms of monitoring, is what do you monitor? Can you afford to monitor all of those? Answer is no. So how many do you monitor? Well, that's one of the purposes of the baseline surveys is to identify what's there, so we can determine what's the most efficacious way to sample and what species should be monitoring. And it's a plethora of species, and to the untrained eye, of course, they all look alike. Interesting thing here is that with the commercial fishing, the recreational fishing techniques, we've been able to document that in the old section of the Point Lobos Marine Reserve, the one that was reserved since 1973, compared to what is now still inside the Point Lobos Reserve but is new, we've been able to show that clearly that there are species that are larger and more numerous in those areas than outside. So showing that the reserve effect is actually possible. It may take some time, but it's certainly to be expected here in California. And then I'm just going to show you that we're catching invertebrates, crabs and sea stars, etc., in our traps as well. Now, moving into deeper waters, though, now we're going to get away from the fish species, and we're starting to look using a submersible at the diversity of species in the deeper portions. And those are, the Soquel Canyon, Portuguese Ledge. These are all in waters that are over 300 feet deep, up to thousands of feet deep. Point Lobos, Point Sur, and Big Creek are areas that we surveyed with a sub. Pick out the sub in this picture. And we surveyed similarly to the way the scuba divers survey. Is we drive along a strip transect where we identify and count and measure all the species we can see in a 2-meter wide strip transect, and we have a lot of technical gear to allow us to do that underwater. And we use some bottom type maps that have been developed over the last 5 or 10 years to know exactly where we are on the seafloor. And again, we start seeing lots of different species. I think, Dennis, there are publications back there. Do you have any of those left?
We have a small set of them. We also have them on the website.
Okay.
I'll refer people to the website later.
So, if you can go to Dennis's website, you can see the brochure that we produced, that Mary Yakovich and I produced, describing the invertebrates and species we saw in each of these different MPAs. And so I won't bother with those. Just to let you know again that with the submersible surveys, we start to get at the wide diversity of species that live off of our coast. And in 2 years, we identified, I think, 140 fish species and 300 or 400 invertebrate groups in deep waters off of our coast. And those areas represent about 75% of the protected area. So these are important yet rarely seen species groups. The other thing, and I'm just going to flip through some nice pictures, is to say that just in a short time, these last 4 years of the consistent monitoring, we're able to see changes in the ocean that are kind of related or may not be related to the marine protected areas. For instance, up off Año Nuevo, we saw huge numbers of small black rockfish last year. 1-year-old black rockfish, telling us that the year before was a bumper crop of that particular species. And we're able to see that in the kelp beds as well, where they see lots of juvenile rockfishes. So that, combined with the oceanographic monitoring that goes on in general in California, gives us insights to how environmental change might affect the species that we see in these MPAs as well, that are unrelated to the MPA itself. So I think that's all I'm going to say.